That's music from The Slew, one of Kid Koala's many projects from the album 100%, a tune called Robin Banks, Due in Time. I should be joined on the line now by Kid Koala. Hello, are you there?
Yes.
Great. Thanks for joining me. I'm looking forward to speaking with you today.
Cool.
So as I was preparing for this interview, I kept coming across articles about how chlamydia has become a problem in the koala bear population. How often do people come and tell you this at shows?
They send me newspaper clippings to our actual snail mail fan mail address. So often, I think I'll have a letter or a piece of artwork, and instead it'll just be a newspaper clipping about the dire straits that the koala population's in, and it's pretty disconcerting, to say the least. Although I don't really have that much of a kinship with the animal, it's just over time I've become an expert by default.
So we can't expect a benefit concert for the koala bears and their STDs?
Oh no, I will definitely, if Sydney Zoo or PETA or WWF or whoever does those kinds of events, I'd fully be available to perform at one of their events. They just haven't called me yet.
Hopefully they're listening and they puts the bug in their ear.
Right.
The first album I got of yours was a Carpal Tunnel Syndrome, and I love that. And I believe you recorded it on a 4-track cassette. And I'm wondering what the recording process is like for you now.
Now, in terms of right this moment.
Yeah. Are you still recording on 4 tracks? Are you completely digital?
No. I have a 24-track reel-to-reel tape machine, and depending on what project it is, sometimes I'll use digital recording technology too. So Pro Tools and whatnot. If I'm collaborating with people on a different coast or in a different country, it's easier to just do it digitally. But
right.
As far as my own kind of passion project recordings, I often like to run to tape for some reason. It just helps me make decisions faster.
Do you still exclusively limit yourself to turntables, or have you embraced Serato?
Actually, what I've embraced on the newest album, 12-Bit Blues, is an actual machine called the SP1200, which is a 1980s era 12-bit sampler that was made famous to me by groups like Public Enemy and a lot of the sort of beat producers of that era. It has this really kind of gritty sound to it, just through its conversion, and it makes everything sound kind of dusted and cool.
Nice.
And so a lot of the skeletons for the tracks on my new album were kind of hand punched on an SP1200, and then all the other layers were scratching off turntables.
There's something about that tactile, being able actually to press on it. I always found it easier using, the old Dr. Rhythm drum machine than trying to program it with, Fruity Loops or whatever crappy drum machine program you could find online, right? So
I still like to play things, even if it's a drum sampler or a drum machine. I don't usually leave it up to the sequencer to kind of do things for me. I like to be in the moment. If the groove sort of drags or speeds up a bit, that's kind of part of it being played live.
Right.
So I get a lot of flack for that, because I guess that's not very dance floor DJ friendly to make tracks that are off grid. But for me, I don't know. It just kind of has a little more fun to it sometimes.
Well, as an audience member, I think that's a lot more fun. I think anyone who's seen you live can appreciate sort of the real live element to it. It's a lot more fun than sometimes just watching a DJ with a laptop, really. So
right
now,
there's pros and cons to that for me. Balancing the whole show on 3 tiny needles that can actually skip and lose grooves and stuff makes it a lot more dangerous for me. But I don't know. Also, just as a performer, kind of exciting in its own way, because it'll change every night. There'll be that human natural drift, or if a needle skips, you have to recover and you have to start counting rotations, and then there's all sorts of things that happen live, every night that kind of keep me on my toes just because of the format that I'm playing it through.
That's what makes live music exciting, right? There's no...
I think so, yeah. There's that, even if the intent is to play it a certain way, you have all these external factors, the second you're using analog vinyl. To me, if it skips, then you got to recover. You got to find a way to find your groove again in a way. I don't know how interesting that is to an audience member, but it's kind of like tightrope walking.
Yeah.
It's like wobble. Oh no, he's gonna fall. Oh no, he's back. Oh,
It is. It's
little moments, little shots of adrenaline for everybody, I guess.
There's no turntable lip syncing. That's what it equaled. Now, you've repeatedly added art to your music. There were full-length graphic novels, Euphonia Must Fall, and Space Cadet that also come with the soundtracks. You had the Music to Draw to performances in Montreal, which invited people to come and draw while you played records. And your albums all come with elaborate artwork. So why is art so closely tied to your music?
Ever since I can remember the recorded medium, or in terms of vinyl records, my first experiences with records were always these 7-inch read-along storybook records, and I would read those obsessively and listen to the records obsessively as a child. And there was always this component of illustration and either text, and then on the music there would be music. Obviously, on the music side of things, there would be the underscore music, there would be a theme song, there would be narrators, there would be voice actors. It was a fully dimensional kind of experience if you're willing to let your imagination go with it. And so those are really wonderful escapist kind of memories for me as a child. Just, it's time to go listen to one of these records and read along in the book. And so I think it's always just wired in my brain that there needs to be some sort of visual component as well,
Mm-hmm.
Whether people actually do the read-along in sequence, for my books, it's not really necessary, but I think as far as while I'm recording it, I always hear music in my head. Sorry. This is early for me, actually. While I'm writing the books, I always kind of hear music in my head. And then in the studio, on the other hand, if I just start with a blank canvas of tape or something and start making music, I always start to visualize characters or scenes or something like that. So the two worlds kind of feed each other.
Right. I still play my read-along records on the show here, and people seem to dig it anyway. So I think there's an audience for that, right?
Yeah.
For those who haven't read your graphic novels, can you give us a general idea of what they're about?
They're quite metaphysical. They deal with heavier themes than I think my records do. Space Cadet, the latest one, it kind of touches on isolation and connectivity and technology and cycles of life and generations and bonds within families and distance and all kinds of things like that. In essence, I think the tone of the book is quite slow, down-tempo, quite melancholy, quite introverted in a way,
Mm-hmm.
which is a departure from The Slough, for example, which is the exact opposite.
Yeah.
But that being said, I think there's always this kind of quiet side. I've always had a kind of quiet side, a little more into that pace of things. And so Space Cadet was a great opportunity to kind of jump into that.
Right. How often do you draw?
Every day.
Yeah. Does it give you something that music...
it's not stuff that I keep. But it'll be, if there's a napkin or a placemat or anything near and a writing utensil, it'll usually get decorated somehow.
Does it give you something that music doesn't?
Yeah, I think so. I think there are things, there's stories that you can tell through comics and through sequential art that kind of have their own time and space as well. So you can totally just read it on its own and at your own rate or whatever, and get as deep into it as you need to.
Right.
But I do enjoy it. There's things that crack me up to no end when drawing. Just as, you know, when you have those moments in the recording studio and something clicks, you know, that gives you a lot of juice too. It's the same thing at the drawing table.
Now, your new show is called the Space Cadet Headphone Tour, and it's going to be here in Ottawa at the Canadian Aviation and Space Museum from April 13th to 15th. Now, each member of the audience is going to lie on an inflatable space pod equipped with their own set of headphones. Where did this idea come from?
It was really to try to get us far away from the standard club style or party rock DJ set experience that I've been doing for over 15 years now. And it's not that I want to abandon that style of show. I really enjoy rocking parties and whatnot, but as far as presenting Space Cadet with its tone and its tempo and the whole vibe of the story and the music that comes along with the book, I felt like the audience needed to be in a little more relaxed kind of atmosphere. So we tried to build this pop-up planetarium that's quite cozy and immersive for people to sort of drift with the music.
And the music is very, very mellow. It's like a very big change from The Slew or even some of your really up-tempo album stuff. What made you go with something so kind of quiet? Just a change of pace? Or is fatherhood, having a little kid with lullabies? What made you go that direction?
No, exactly. Yeah, that actually had a direct impact on it. My daughter was born... well, actually, the last two chapters of the book, I was still etching on the scratch boards, waiting for her arrival. And then when she was actually born, I just had this flood of ideas for music. And often she would be in the studio just a few feet away from my piano or the turntables. And I don't know, for most new parents, I think it was about trying to not wake the baby, you know? So I played everything very quietly. I did all the turntables with headphones on. And it was really just trying to keep that kind of lullaby element to it. So they're sort of piano and turntable lullabies for her, essentially, which fit perfectly with the story. I actually started writing this story 8 years ago. This was before my wife and I were even dating, you know, but there was always this character, this father and a daughter figure, or this guardian robot, this daughter figure. So it was just kind of coincidental that we were expecting a baby and it turned out she was going to be a girl and everything. So in a way, there was a lot of resonance with my own life.
It was meant to be.
As to what was going on. Yeah. I mean, and it was a heavier year for our family too, because we had some family members pass on as well. And so there's a lot of things, you know, we were all kind of dealing with and thinking about, but with the arrival of the new child and stuff, it kind of all balanced out in the end, you know. But I think all that sort of helped set the tone to what kind of music was going to happen.
Now, you've done music for films, including Shaun of the Dead and Scott Pilgrim versus the World. How do you approach that compared to how you create music for a Kid Koala album?
Let's see. Well, when you're scoring for film, there's already a narrative going on. So often it's just working with the director or working with the composer and trying to figure out, you know, how to make that scene stronger with music. You know, how the music actually support the drama in the scene. So I don't know. I enjoy working on film scores, but again, it's often the director's vision, you know. So you have a few meetings, you talk it through, you try to sketch out some ideas to see what'll work, and then you go with it. So often, and that makes it sound like a lot more involved than it is. But for instance, there's a movie about to be released. I think the trailer comes out today. It's called Looper. It's directed by Ryan Johnson, and he called me and said, "Okay, there's a scene where there's this nightclub that's set in the future, and it's just a story about time travel and sort of people in the future are fetishistic about the past, especially the styles of music and whatnot." And so the whole concept of this scene, he told me, I need a really kind of sexed up fan dance, kind of slow, thing for the dancers on stage to do the sultry thing to, which is great. I mean, for me, I don't usually get asked to do that type of music, so I kind of dive into it with everything I got. I just enjoy the idea of collaborating and kind of pushing what it is I do musically and to fit what their vision is.
Right. Well, speaking of collaboration, you worked with a variety of rock musicians on an album under the name of The Slew. That's who we started off the interview with. It's a great album. How did that come to be that you were working with these guys making these sounds?
That record was made over the course of 4 years. It was primarily a producer named Dynamite D, Dylan Frombach, and myself. And we had done some remixes and some odd tracks here and there for different compilations, and we always thought it would be great to do a whole record together. We didn't know what that record would be until the idea of The Slew came about. We just both realized it would be fun to make a sort of Black Sabbath-style album, but all off the turntables.
Mm-hmm.
So our goalposts were always, what would Black Sabbath sound like if it was produced by Public Enemy's Bomb Squad, and all done on turntables on top of that. So those were our three kind of limitations, not limitations, but goalposts, and we just tried to delve into that as best we could. We had a lot of fun. A lot of it was done out in Seattle, recording in Dylan's garage. We plug turntables into amps and overdrive them and mic them, so it has this very garagey, I don't know,
rock
grunge.
effects.
Yeah, we called it grungealism, but the term never caught on because I think we're the only band that ever went there. But yeah, we wanted that sort of sludge blues, a really, really heavy kind of record that all our skater friends would enjoy.
Nice.
But yeah, again, all done off turntables. So in essence, it's still a very craft-heavy record, but despite all that, we wanted the rock kids to be able to enjoy it, which was great. So I think by the time we went on tour, I was talking to Dylan, who doesn't like to tour, how we would perform this live, and we were going through the recording sessions and realizing that I would need about 8 DJs and 16 turntables to pull off these songs. So we started to make a list of people we wanted to invite to join this band. And at one point, Dylan, and I just agreed that it was too much of a headache to try to fly in all these people to rehearse, and we should strip it down and try to make it, more like a rock experience. So we decided to look for a rhythm section. And at that point, I had already met Chris and Miles, formerly of this band Wolf Mother in Australia, and we hit it off, and I played them early versions of the Slew stuff, and they were very excited about it. And so we approached them and said, hey, if we decide to take the Slew on the road, would you guys want to come play? And so that was great for us. We just had, one of the heaviest rhythm sections in rock, backing us up. And then I brought DJ P-Love from New York, who's someone I play with a lot. And we have, a good chemistry on stage, and he's a wonderful musician in his own right, as well as being able to DJ in terms of us running 6 turntables at a time without it getting too hectic. So, we basically, flew the Chris and miles up from Australia, and then had some rehearsals up here in Montreal. Paulo and I were actually cutting vinyl for that show, I think, for about 5 days before that. So we had to cut 80 custom vinyl for that show, and then, learn all rotations and labels and stuff like that. And then Chris and Miles came in, and it actually locked pretty quickly. Just within a few days, like, that show was pretty tight. So we're excited.
You sound like you loved the project. Will there be another Slew album?
Yeah, I'm actually going to Seattle after this Ottawa trip, so we're gonna start on the next album. We've actually have a lot of source material this time with Chris and Miles playing bass and drums, and maybe, I don't know, I imagine we've got about 14 hours of stuff from that.
Nice.
So we're gonna comb through it, find parts that we want to kind of cut up and loop up, and then cut that stuff to vinyl and then reassemble it. So yeah, it's the beginning of a long process again, but we're excited about it.
I'm looking forward to it. Will we see another Bullfrog album?
I don't know. I mean, I haven't seen a lot of those cats in years. But Mark actually signed a solo recording contract for 3 records, and he was in Berlin for a while recording, and so really he was the head of that project. So I guess it would just be up to me getting the call.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, before I let you go, can you tell us what Turntable Bingo is?
Turntable Bingo?
Yeah.
Are you speaking about when we did bingo at Short Attention Span Theater?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That was just a moment of it's all about pacing in a set, and even if most of the show doesn't involve block rocking beats or anything like that, I think that the style of DJing can easily become too much information, because I might fly through 100 records in about 40 minutes.
Right.
So every now and then it's about trying to find a breather for the audience and for myself. So we did at Short Attention Span Theater, everybody got a bingo card, and it was a great way for us to introduce characters from the various books and themes from the different records. And so every bingo number was, in fact, a character or a drawing from a different page on the book. And so it was an easy kind of way to just integrate the theme of the book in a kind of fun way to the show. And everybody loves bingo, I think.
Oh, yeah.
It was something that I learned when I was studying to become an elementary school teacher, which never actually happened. But I remember during my stage having to do a bingo game in the language arts class of a first grade class. And that was the only time I was able to hold their attention for language arts, because I don't think they were interested in learning how to spell quite yet. But if you can make a game out of something, I think you can focus the kids.
Right.
Easier.
So the Space Cadet Headphone Tour comes to Ottawa at the Canadian Aviation and Space Museum from April 13th to 15th, and you can go catch Kid Koala's really excellent and innovative show. So thanks very much for joining me. It was a pleasure speaking with you.
Cheers.
All right, well, have a great trip to Ottawa.
Great.
So we're going to play.
Come introduce yourself if you're at one of the gigs.
We'll do.
We're usually kicking around in the gallery before. There's this interactive gallery before the actual Headphone concert, and we're usually there running the games and the machines. And
that's good to know.
Everybody play with. So come say hello.
We'll do. So we're gonna hear something from the new album. We're gonna start though with something from the Carpal Tunnel Syndrome disc. This is Fender Bender on CKCU.